Good evening. Welcome to Real Talk Conversations with Angel. Tonight's conversation is part two on rebuilding the Black family. On part two, I would like to continue to talk about unifying the Black family. I would like us to hold a conversation about the ills in the Black family and the Black community and understand that all of this stems back to racism, to slavery, and to a mindset of breaking us as a people. So, tonight, let's discuss. There are ills in the Black community, of course. We understand that the poverty rate is extreme. We understand that they have drugs and alcohol problems in the community because of the lack of employment. And when a person is, or a people is desperate, they take desperate measures. So, therefore, the concentration of where Blacks are in the different communities in America has led to crime ridden neighborhoods. Now, how did that occur? Well, let's go back in history. Let's look at where people were concentrated. Most Blacks were concentrated in the South because of slavery. Now, during the Great Migration, where Blacks started going up north, seeking better opportunities for employment, that's where concentrations of Blacks began to get heavy in areas like Chicago, Detroit, and the Washington area. But understand, the railroad system had a lot to do with the movement of Blacks because Blacks got employment with the rail system, and employers start advertising and giving bonuses for the Great Migration that happened up north. Now, if you look at the history of racism in America, Americans would like to say that, well, if you just work hard and pull yourself up by your bootstraps, that you can make it. Well, this is true. But when I was in college, if you look at my thesis for my master's, which was on in urban planning, I showed the businesses of the South after Reconstruction, and Black businesses were thriving. But let's take it from 1865 all the way up into 1965. Between 1865 and 1965, large concentrations where Blacks had businesses and strips and thriving communities were stripped in order that their businesses be dissolved, not only to dissolve the businesses, but to dissolve the communities that were thriving. We all know about Tulsa, but what you don't know is like places where, like where I grew up in New Orleans, um, there was a thriving corridor right on the St. Bernard Avenue where Black businesses were thriving. That was decimated in order to make room for I-10, 610. Okay. Now, if you go across America and look, there are places where Blacks were thriving. Now, it's one thing to deny the ability to read and write to a people, which we know occurred. Systemic racism is really the cause of many of the ills of the Black community. There was the Moynihan Report in 1965. Now, I talked last time about the concentration of single mothers, and the Moynihan Report had some valid points, but understand Racism in America was alive then, was and is alive now. So let's look at some statistics. When I pointed out in the last video that the single mother rate was already double that of the white community, why was that? Well, it had to do with Black fathers seeking employment and leaving the family, hoping to be able to either relocate their family or send money home. So it has been systemic racism that has caused many of the ills of the Black family. Now, one of the things that statistics will show us is that the number of couples who are working in the Black community are above the poverty line. So, given the chance for employment and true employment, careers, opportunity for education, we understand that it works in all communities. Let's look at, and I will share my screen now, of the Brookings Institute, where they talk about the false narrative, such as the hierarchy of human value. And when we are talking about human value, we as a people were not valued in America. We were valued for our labor, but we were not valued as people. Understand, we were considered chattel. Now, if you consider chattel like your cow, well, cows are to be slaughtered. And when you think of a human being as you think of an animal, then you have no problem slaughtering them. Therefore, when we look at America, we can see that the value of Black Americans have not been valued. Therefore, we have places like in Texas, Sandra Bland. She was stopped for a car violation and lost her life. We have all these instances across America in which, given the opportunity to do the right thing, when it comes down to us, it does not occur. So I said I was going to share my screen and I was going to share this report. So share screen. Excuse me. This report by Andrew Perry has a lot to do with showing and giving some details, not only about the Moynihan report, but also it gives details and a structural analysis of how dangerous it is to say, well, if they emulate the white community, then they would not have these problems when systemic racism has caused many of the ills in the Black community. Knowing your price, valuing Black lives and property is one of the greatest books to read if you want to understand about redlining and how the value of Black homes have been devalued. Even today, when you go to purchase a home, the value is much less when they see a Black face than when they see a white face. I've experienced it purchasing homes myself. I've experienced it when I was in the hospital having my son, and my son is 24 years old. I had insurance. The Caucasian lady across from me did not have insurance. Now, it should not have mattered, but it did. I could not get anything. I'm not a cup of water, I'm not a cookie, anything. And the woman across from me, as soon as she rang the bell, they were running to her. Now, the sad part about that was it was a Black aura in that was running to the aid of this white woman and wouldn't give me a glass of water. So, getting back to the point, there is nothing wrong with Black people that ending racism can't solve. Presumptions of Black people's unworthiness undercut efforts to invest in Black majority neighborhoods. There's a whole lot of programs and research that attempt to fix Black people and not enough focused on fixing structural racism. When he is talking about structural racism, we're talking about going to the bank to get a loan, which usually you're denied, going to buy a home, which, unless you have a large down payment, you cannot get. So let's go on to this report. A figure of 156 billion is what it has cost Blacks when selling their homes, the devalue of their homes in their neighborhoods. Now, interesting enough, I was in a position years ago where I was selling a home and I literally had to take everything out of that home, all pictures and everything else, in order to sell that home. And if the people knew that a Black person lived there at the time, I was living in a country town in Louisiana, that home still would not have been sold. Black entrepreneurs certainly could use the money that devalued 156 billion that our homes are undervalued at when we go to sell them to build our communities. Equity. The only thing any person, any Black person in America wants is equity. And it is a word that is used whenever we are talking about another race of people, but it's one that is seldom used properly when in terms of Black people. Education reformers ignore structural racism, saying that it's too hard to address segregation in school financing systems. But when reform is applied within the confines of inequity in Black majority cities, we leave little room but to effectively blame Black teachers, parents, and school boards for their underachievement. Now, when you devalue a home in a Black area, you devalue the funding, and therefore the amount of dollars that go into that public school system is far less than in an area that has a low concentration of Blacks where the value is inflated. So this is where I'm talking about. Let me stop sharing my screen. This is where I'm talking about. It is a systematic problem that we have in our community that it has not been caused by us. When you have a system where a person cannot seek employment, get the education they need to be employed, then you have a system that is broken. We are Americans. I am an American, and I am an American that wishes to be a part of changing the dynamic, changing the paradigm. We need a complete paradigm shift. Our young people are moving toward that paradigm shift in that they believe that people are people, many of them. But it is going to take a change, a structural change, a change in our community, a change in our mindset, and a change in the way business is done in order for us to break that achievement gap. Because there's an achievement gap when a child is hungry. Obviously, they aren't concentrating on what's being taught to them in the school system. When a teenager has to have a job to help his family, He's tired. He can't concentrate on all of the academics that's being given to him. And when it's time for a child to be a child, it is very important that the system makes sure that every way they can help that family, whether it's finances, whether it's employment for the parents, whether it's food, no matter what it is, a child needs to be a child. And because you are 16 or 17 years old, does not mean you're an adult yet. Even the legal system says you're not an adult until you're 18. You can't drink until you're 21. So, why is it that we believe that in impoverished Black areas, the children can go and get a job and help their families at 15? A child shouldn't have to have a job at 15. If a child wants to work, then minimal hours, as long as their studies do not hurt from that. But that is not the case in our community. And I am here to work with you to change a system, to work with our politicians to change policy, change it in Washington, change it at the state level so that our communities can be rebuilt. We as a people can work together. We can move forward as Americans, all Americans, with equity, because every American deserves to have a decent job, a stable life, and be able to educate their children in order that the American dream can be realized by everyone and not just a few. It has been an American nightmare for many in the Black community. And the concentration of Blacks getting educated has increased, but our level of love and community has decreased. It is time for us to come together as one and rebuild our communities. I am here and I want to hear your comments, and I want you to contact me at Real Talk Conversations with Angel at gmail.com in order to work with me to make a change to this system. If it takes writing to congressmen, if it takes getting more politicians to actually do the right thing, then that is what we as a people need to do. I'm here in the fight. I want you here with me in the fight, and we will rebuild the Black community because it is not just our future, it is our longing, our right, and it is our God-given right to have our children have hope. I want to inject hope back into the Black community, and we can do this as one. Thank you for joining Real Talk Conversations with Angel. Like this video, share this video, and I want to hear your comments.